Hi, everybody. It's Dana Brooks from Facing Brooks, and welcome back to another EmPower Hour brought to you by the EmPower Plant. So we're talking about relationships again. This is February, so we're talking about all kind of relationships. This time, we're going to talk about the ones that hit you in the gut, the romantic relationships. So we have a wonderful guest today. She is a shero. She's in the Cool Girl Club. Everybody on the panel knows and loves her. We've got Trudy Ennis Richardson in the house tonight. Hey, Trudy, where are you?
Hi, how are y'all
Hey,
tonight?
lady. You look
Great to be here.
fantastic.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
100%. You look empowered. You look fantastic. You look ready to go. How are you feeling?
I am feeling fantastic. Lisa did my makeup this afternoon and I feel amazing.
Shout out to Lisa Davis, man.
Yes.
Magician. She's a magician.
She's a magician, but she's also a leader. She leads by example. You know, she's all about healthy living, good nutrition, helpful choices, treating your body like a temple. So she's an inspiration to me, and she makes us all feel beautiful on the inside and the outside. So I'm glad that she's in our orbit and she's in our lives. She does so much good for women. I want to welcome you, and I want to talk about our panel today because we've got some extra people on it. Again, we've got our people coming from all walks of lives, all developmental stages, because relationships, and especially a legal overlay on them. You know, are you cohabiting? Are you thinking about getting into a relationship? Do you need to get out of a relationship? You know, everybody's in a different stage. Or are you in a great relationship, but it started one way and then now you're at a different stage and you need to think about protecting, yourself. So lots of things to consider here. So welcome back. First of all, Rose Caswick. Hey, Rose.
Hello.
Hey, what are we drinking, Rose?
We're drinking an Aperol Spritz, which is a very trendy brunch drink right now. And it's in honor of Grace Coddington, who is a fashion editor. She used to work for Vogue. She's got big red hair. You would probably know her if you saw her. And for germane to today's discusussion, divorced twice. So,
well, she's an amateur. She'll catch up, I'm sure. No, Rose, you sent me to Google on that one. You sent me to Google with her because I was like, I don't know her. And I kind of pride myself on knowing, empowered.
You've seen the documentary, the September issue about Anna Wintour. She's in that. And that's kind of where she blew up in the public eye, though she's been working behind the scenes in fashion for a long time.
Gotcha. Very cool. I saw her shocking red hair. I love her. I dig her energy. And I wanted to talk to you too, because there's that, I've been watching on Netflix, that documentary that Griffin Dunn did on his, I think it's his aunt, Joan Didion. Remember we did a drink to her? Yes, that's a good one. If anybody wants to watch something in the middle of the night, I highly recommend it. Carrie Roan is back, my law partner. Carrie, you and Trudy used to be law partners.
We did. I'm so glad. In fact, Trudy and I go way, way back because she used to be a lawyer in Jacksonville when I was a lawyer in Tallahassee. And we used to travel together and take medical malpractice depositions together when we defended doctors. And then she came over and she joined my husband's law practice. And then I joined my husband's law practice, and we were law partners for a while. And then Trudy had the cojones, the courage and the confidence to go out on her own and open her own law office. And I'm so freaking proud of her. And she's just really cool. So I'm really excited to have her on.
I want to talk to you about that, Trudy. It's a little off because we're talking about family law, but we're also talking about empowering women all the time. So I want to hear a little bit from you about what your story is when we come back around, and then what made you take that leap, and how did you get the confidence and plan for it and that sort of thing? Because a lot of women do that, and then a lot of women lawyers are really thinking outside the box right now and finding out that a conventional law firm does not work for them anymore. And you lay COVID on top of it and forget about it. They're just looking for some other model that works for them. So I want to hear from you, and I would like to encourage other women who just feel like, oh man, this treadmill I'm on is not working. Kimmy Hogan, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much.
You're a married person, and you know Trudy, I think. Don't you know Trudy?
Yes. Yeah, good to see you. And married almost 7 years now. And most recently have been watching the Netflix Married at First Sight. So been thinking
I have not done that.
Of
course, it's early.
Not yet.
They fight a lot. Spoiler.
I'm off fighting. And the first sight thing, I don't know. It just depends on how long you want that to last, I guess. No, that is interesting. That is interesting. Sometimes you think, well, maybe that's do it a different way. Hey, we've got Shavetta Carter in the house. Shavetta is a friend of mine, and she's interested. She watches. She's an empowered woman. Welcome, Shavetta. Tell me what interested you in today's topic.
Well, I am divorced and I'm remarried. So I'm one time in, two times come through. And so yeah, I was just really interested. I'm just always trying to look to empower others.
Yeah.
Just even sometimes just by telling your story. So.
Yeah, 100%. I like that. Let's hear from Lori Finn, our marketing director. She's back today.
Hi.
Welcome. Hey there, Lori. What interested you in our topic today?
Well, I am divorced and wish I had met with Trudy instead of just going blindly into mediation.
Hey, for the record, Trudy, I recommended you to Lori about 5,000 million times.
And I called the appointment several times and then just, I don't know, got scared or whatever, intimidated or whatever, thinking I didn't want to be contentious or this or that. I wish I had just made the call.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. So many times with women, when they're faced with any sort of difficulty, our MO is to get through it. It's just to get through it. We know we're going to take a hit. Let's, try to make it as fast and painless as possible. But a lot of times we do not do the things we need to do to protect ourselves in those settings. Let me get back to our guest, Trudy. What's your story? Tell us about you. If somebody said, who is Trudy Ennis Richardson? Just give me the short story. What would it be?
Okay, elevator speech.
There you go.
Went to, high school like everybody else, started college, didn't perform very well, had other interests that involved like the corner pub and socializing and so on.
So you were normal.
Yeah. Took a little hiatus, had my son who is currently stationed overseas. He is married to the most incredible woman on the face of the planet who should be with us because she is an empowered overachiever. Farm D, yoga instructor, winemaker.
Wow.
Yeah, she's fabulous. After having my son, I went to work for a law firm and thought, you know what, I could do that. And I could probably do that better than the older white guy who's telling me how to do this.
Yeah.
Sounds like someone else I know, Dana.
Yes. Just like you, Dana, I worked in the back of the house. I worked as a paralegal, and then I went to law school. As Carrie intimated, I was with Sawfield Shad over in Jacksonville.
Oh, yeah. You did med mal defense, I bet.
Yes.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And am remarried, like some of the other folks have shared.
Sure, I do that
My
often.
husband has 3 kids. So we have 30, 25, 23, 17. Boy, princess. I didn't always think I wanted to do family law, but being a member of a blended family where the relationships are so fundamentally different, kind of gave me that impetus. I started doing a little bit of family law while I was at Gilday, probably 20-30% of my practice, and decided, much like before going to law school, I've been saying for years, when I am queen, I'm going to do it this way. Mm-hmm. And I found this little office in Midtown and thought, you know what? It's going to be now, or I'm going to be retired and say, I wish I had.
Yeah.
So now I'm queen and I do it just like that.
Now you're the queen. And you know what? The queen, once you decide to take that kind of a leap, you're not going to fail. You got too much invested in it. You can't. I mean, women just, they don't fail. I write about that. And I'd say, how many times have you heard of a woman who really made a bold move, took a bold move and failed? I can't think of, I'm sure it's happened. But I can't think, but I can tell you, I could rattle off just scores of women who dream about things and never do them.
Yeah.
I can tell you scores of women who think about things and ruminate on it and just never pull the trigger and regret it. And that's sad. I would rather try something and realize, I don't know what I'm doing, because then you can get help and tweak and get better. But if you don't take the first step and try, you're going to fail. So I think that the failure women experience is from not trying.
I think that's
Totally.
very true. I have
You know, you talked
fantastic
about,
women that work with me.
Yeah.
I have, let's see, a law clerk, Allison McDonough, an assistant, Julie Wolf, who is also a real estate agent on the side. We all got the side gigs going on.
Side
'cause we're
gigs.
all empowered women. The woman who runs the barn where I have my thoroughbreds answers the phone. My stepdaughter answers the phone. We have a fantastic, the only man at the firm, undergrad intern Travis Waters, who was on the front page of the Democrat last week for his voter registration efforts with the FSU ID. Yes.
Awesome.
And then, of course, I have a few female tenants, and then the dogs.
great, great. Yeah, Tree's really into her horses. She's big into horses. And I look at women like you and I think, oh gosh, she's got all this on her plate, but then she makes time for these really time consuming, intense, you know, other things like horses. You don't just dabble in horses. That seems like you go all in on
She
that.
does,
So
yeah.
is that a stress relief or just a total passion, drive, love? What is that for you?
It's both my zen and my adrenaline.
Gotcha.
I've been riding. This year makes my 50th year. So it's not a phase. It's not going away. I like to jump over things at speed.
That's awesome.
Hey, Dana, can I just say one thing about Trudy?
Yeah.
She's kind of glazing over something, and I think it's really important that we all talk about it.
Okay.
We're the firm that Trudy and I were in beforehand. We were both partners in this law firm together, and it was an extremely healthy law firm. It still is. Very protected environment. You know what I mean? Lots of clients, lots of work. I mean, you know, a very cush, safe environment. And it's so, I don't want to say that I was envious of Trudy, but I was so proud of her and excited for her when she decided to leap from that. It's like leaping from your parents' house into your own house and your own household and your own bills with like no safety net whatsoever underneath it into a law practice, and you know, in an area that's already saturated with a lot of lawyers. So I think like, you know, what she did, and Dana, you've done something similar, is very admirable. And I want to know if Trudy was scared when she did it, and I want to know how she got over that fear and made the leap.
Yeah. Did you just decide I'm doing this and I will make it happen? Or are you a planner? You know, did you say, okay, you know, in 6 months, a year from now, I'm going to do it. I've got these goals, you know, in 30 days, I want this, 60 days, I want this. How did you go about it?
So I started toying with the idea in late summer and started, because I'm the cheapest human being on the planet. It goes hand in hand with having horses, since you have no extra money. I started buying office furniture used and on Amazon and here and there. Didn't have a space, just kept it all in my garage because I was going to do this. Found the space, and within 3 weeks was open.
Yeah.
Completely terrified because my husband and I are a subsequent marriage. Our finances are completely separate, and it was rise or fall on my own.
Right.
And the first 30 days were lean, and since then, I would say probably my business has quintupled.
Is your business mainly, that's fantastic. Is your business mainly referrals? Do you do any, what do you do to network, market, sell yourself?
So, and I failed to mention this very important part. I have a separate mediation practice that does family mediations, now circuit civil and arbitrations. And I got a lot of FaceTime with the family law community by doing program mediations in the courthouse for indigent folks, both represented and unrepresented. And I have gotten a ton of referrals from colleagues, from former clients, from folks in the medical profession. It just seems that my clients are very happy with the service and the results, and that brings in business. We do some advertising, but not a whole lot.
Kimmy, do you have any thoughts or questions that you want to ask Trudy? I have my own, but I want to make sure I hear from our panel. So when you're listening to her, either as a woman lawyer, either as a person, married with children, what kind of things do you want to pick the brain of a family law attorney about?
Well, I definitely wanted to know, what is your legal advice for couples that are married that have young children? Specifically for, I don't know if there's, you recommend that definitely set up your wills. Anything. I just want to know what your thoughts are.
Think about who you want to take care of your children. You know, should something happen to you, because I was getting to that point in a marriage one time, and things broke down. You know, when you started going through the things you have to do to get your wills in order, your things in order, you know, you just assume you all agree, you would both agree on those things, and sometimes you don't.
And
Yeah.
is it as easy as designating someone? Do you get to choose, or is there some other factors to it?
So typically the other parent is primary.
Yeah.
But
if something happens to you both,
right, intact families travel together.
Right.
And so there's a much larger likelihood that something's going to happen to both parents at once, or even if something fatal happens to one parent, the other parent can be incapacitated. It's critically important to have a process in place. And for those of us who are lawyers and have other responsibilities, talk to an estate planning lawyer, set up a trust, take care of your children if you become incapacitated, to take care of you or your spouse if you become incapacitated. If you are non-intact family, it makes it a little more difficult because the ex that you're no longer with is going to have primary ability to take over the parenting. So most of the time that works just fine, but some people have such a toxic relationship that they can't plan together. That's unfortunate, but it is reality.
You know, that's obviously one of the things you have to think of. You have to think about, how am I going to care for the people? And you also need to think about, what if one of us gets hurt? You know, do you have enough insurance or assets to replace that person's income? And a lot of this, you know, we had the two Bens, the financial planners from Northwestern Mutual, we have Ben Gamp and Graybor, and they talked to us about a lot of those things. But, you know, sometimes you just don't take care of them. And then you get into the middle of a relationship, and then, you know, things just don't go the way you think they will. And sometimes, you know, just even talking about it can planning for bad things can make a marriage, you know, difficult, can bring a lot of, you know, maybe your mom gets involved and wants to be involved in it. Maybe his parent, maybe their grandparents who think they have rights. You ever have that come up whenever they're talking about these sorts of things? Do you ever have grandparents who think that they have actual rights to their grandchildren? And how do you all handle that?
I probably get one call a week on
Yeah.
that very issue.
Yeah.
Probably my parents every single time.
Those kids.
Yeah. A lot of them do that. A lot of them think, I don't mean to use legalese too much, but they almost feel like they have like a property right. You know, it's like, especially the more they have to do with them, like, you know, I raised this child while she was in school, or when the kid was in kindergarten, yada, yada, yada. So I should have a say in where they go to school. I should, you know, whenever they get divorced, when my daughter gets divorced, I should have the first right of refusal on any kind of child care issues, that sort of thing. What is the status of grandparent rights in Florida?
So except for some very limited circumstances, i.e. where a parent is deceased or a parent is incarcerated, grandparents rely on the goodwill of the actual parents. The parents have a constitutional right to raise their children as they see fit, which is why the courts aren't going to jump in and say, okay, Graham, you raised this child and now you have input into this family that you're not a part of that nuclear family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have some sort of inherent right. Now, we're not talking about whenever custody is taken away or a child is put in temporary custody of a grandparent. We're not talking about that, because they do get a certain set of rights whenever the legal system is involved. We're talking about just regular old, you know, my mama doesn't think you ought to be doing that kind of thing. So when we did Law Call, that legal call-in show, every time we had a family law attorney on it, we got that call. Every single time. I'm a grandparent, I want my rights. You know, I'm looking at some of our comments. I don't mean to go off, but I want to respond because we're doing this live and we're getting some comments live. Our producer, Whitney Morris, is sending them to me because, as usual, my tech isn't working like I want it to be. But one of our people says, I don't believe in divorce. She says, I don't believe in divorce. And I respect that. But here's the problem. It takes two people to get into one and only one person to get out. So whether you believe in it or not, it's there, it exists, and you can't do anything about it when someone wants to leave. I was a family law mediator too before I went to law school, and I would get this a lot when one person did not want the divorce. I would hear things like, well, we need to go to counseling. The judge just needs to tell them to go to counseling, and believing that a counselor is going to say to that other person, you're all wrong, you need to get it together and do the right thing, and then everybody will go back to being happy.
Except,
And then the judges don't do that. And, you know, the judge can, as I understand now, you correct me because I'm going off, you know, 10-year at least old information, but a judge could say, okay, we're going to table this. Y'all go to counseling for 3 months or whatever. But in my experience, they never did it. And when I talked to the judges, they said it's because you're just kicking that can down the road and you're just keeping these people embroiled in controversy longer. You know, even if they went to counseling, one of them's got the foot out the door, or at least only one foot in the door. So we're just delaying the inevitable. Do you find that happening in your practice, where somebody just says this is morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, it's not a Christian life, it's not a religious decision, we made a commitment and I expect this person to honor it, make them honor it?
I do. And I have the same experience that you had during family law mediation. Sometimes the parties come in and they say, hey, we want to adjourn, give it 90 days and try some counseling. I find that the judges are even more so now hesitant to stay or abate proceedings and order the adults to counseling. They do it for the kids all the time.
Yeah.
Because in no small measure, the court is looking at a 5, 10, 15, 30-minute window of your lives. And if that judge is wrong, and this is an abusive relationship, somebody could end up really hurt if they don't have access to the court.
Yeah, especially once the escalation starts. You know, we've had some posts lately on the EmPower plant, and I encourage people to go back and look at some of the posts in the last week or two. You know, sometimes a person is an abuser, but not the physical abuser. They call it invisible abuse because they don't leave marks and bruises. And then a lot of people don't take that as seriously because they're like, well, he's never been physical. They've never been physical. But wait until you decide to leave and see how physical they get. And a lot of people have been hurt, if not killed, just because they finally decide to leave a psychological abuser who then snapped and became a physical abuser. This is a very volatile time in that relationship.
It's dangerous, right? They're trying to leave is when you really have nothing to lose. So
yeah, right. And even the psychological abuse, the partner in the relationship who is the psychological abuser can isolate, can prevent access to communication, to family, to professionals, to funding. And then by the time the abused person decides to leave that partnership or that relationship, they have no assets, no ability to leave, and no way and nowhere. So I think that's one of the big contributing factors to courts not getting on the bandwagon and saying, okay, adults, you're going to counseling.
I want to talk about the financial control, because that's a lot of what I hear about is the financial control. I couldn't leave if I wanted to. I can't afford a house. I can't afford a deposit. I can't, you know, I can't even afford a filing fee. I hear sometimes. I damn sure can't afford a lawyer. You know, so are there times where people come to you, and even if they don't, let's just assume this. What if I'm in that situation and I want your help, I can't afford you? Do you ever help people kind of come up with a way to plan their exit so they can be safe, so they can get some money set aside? Do you ever help people kind of pre-plan?
I do a lot of that, both in my private practice and clients that are referred to me through either legal services or legal aid. It's a very important part of disentangling a relationship is to ensure that before your client or the person that you're advocating for, before they actually make that move, they understand the commitment they're making and the resources that they're going to need. And if they need a plan, then we put that together. It may be a 5-year plan.
Yeah. I've heard that. I've heard people say
wage earners, or for folks who are in a much more controlling, disadvantaged relationship. It can take a year or two. There are portions of the statutes that provide for attorney's fees based upon need on the one hand and ability to pay on the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is something I would want people to know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times there may be their money available for this, but you can't get your hands on it. because they put it in other accounts that you can't access, and you only have so much money that they allow you access to. And you
Sure.
can't, you know, squirrel away $200 at a time every other week until you can get $5,000 put together for a retainer for somebody. Are there ways that you could go and represent somebody and go to a court in a preliminary fashion and say, look, this person obviously is controlling some money. I need some of that money to shake loose so this person could get into a safe home, you know, start their legal process, that sort of thing. Is there a way to get sort of a temporary support order, that sort of thing? And what's the standard for that? How hard is that?
So yes, the short answer is yes, there is a way to do it. The longer answer is you can have support unconnected with a dissolution of marriage. In other words, we are apart. We don't know where we're going from here, but we need support. Or you can have support connected with a dissolution of marriage. Thankfully, our circuit has a standing order. The minute you file a dissolution of marriage action, this standing order goes into effect. And it says essentially, I'm summarizing a couple of pages.
Sure.
You can't change insurance. You can't change property titles. You can't move money other than to pay normal bills without an order of court or the written agreement of the other party. Now,
You know,
that's great for folks who know what they have.
Yeah.
There
So I mean,
are a
I can't
lot-
tell you how many, you know
Yeah.
how many women come in there, they don't have any idea
Mhm.
what they
And I will
have.
say this too. I have found that in both heterosexual, heterogendered relationships and same gender relationships, that is very common, especially when you hit people that are my age and maybe a little older. The division of labor is such that somebody earns and pays and somebody kind of chucks along.
That has nothing to do with gender. Power imbalances in relationship, that is not a hetero specific
No.
issue. Every relationship has got a power dynamic, and sometimes that changes, sometimes it doesn't. But I tell you this, it follows the money.
Absolutely.
Power follows money in any relationship. And so many times I will see that change in a relationship and it'll kill it. It'll end it because when money is power, the person who has it is not interested in losing it. And when they do, they feel just like they're I don't want to be here anymore. If I can't be the king of the hill, I don't want to be here anymore. So it's very interesting how money affects, and how you have to protect your money, because a lot of people get into relationships right out of college or when they're young and everything's great and we trust each other. And the next thing you know, somebody's looking at protecting some assets and isn't liking their vulnerability. So then you're looking at, do I want to try to get this person to enter into a post-nuptial agreement? And why would they? Why would I lessen my position? I guess there's some reasons some people maybe to get out, maybe, I don't know. But do you deal with that too much? Prenups and post-nuptial agreements?
I do a fair amount of planning as part of my practice. And this was something, wrapping back around to what Kimmy said, this was something that I always suggest to either new families or intact families. You got to have a plan. That may be an estate plan, and it may be a pre or post-nup. Mm-hmm. Especially with subsequent marriages, because as those of us who are remarried or divorced and remarried know, a much higher percentage of subsequent marriages fail.
Yeah, I used to have the data on that, but it's pretty old. But it used to be something like 62 to 67% of second and multiple marriages fail.
Yes, I think second is actually down a little bit, but thirds and subsequent is way up.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you're coming into these relationships with more assets and more liabilities than you do your first relationship. And it's much more important to plan.
Yeah. And you have other considerations. You know, when you're starting a marriage together, your children are yours together. But whenever you've got your kids coming into marriage, they got their kids coming into marriage, that's a whole thing. You know, and a lot of people, myself included, I thought, I don't want a prenup because that just to me, it's like a pre-divorce. Let's go ahead and divorce now, get all that in paper, and then see if this thing works out. But if it doesn't, we already did the hard stuff. So that's what it felt like to me. It's very unsexy, very unromantic. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to marry. Why would I want to marry somebody I can't trust? It's almost like saying you're marrying somebody you can't trust. So I rationalized a lot of reasons to not do that. And I regretted that. I think that would have been a better idea. And if I ever do it again, which I won't do, I would do a prenup. Let me give a shout out real quick to a couple of people who are your super fans. Trudy. We've got Danielle Fries Wall. She's sending you some massive love.
Hey,
who else do we have? We've got Julie Wolf. She says, you are amazing and you don't know fear.
She's my fantastic Uber everything assistant.
I love it. We've got Tinsley Smith, who's giving you some love. Allison McDonough, of course, and Lisa Davis saying hey to everybody on the show. She's our biggie. Lisa, I think I'm doing her name right, Rydell Hoover. She had a good question. She goes, what do you have to do to become a family law mediator?
So
Because that changed from when I was one. What do you do now?
And interestingly, I'll just give you the general rule. There are some COVID exceptions for people who took the class in 2020 and during the social distancing, there are some differing requirements. Generally, for lawyers, you go to a class, it's a 40-hour class, you learn how to mediate, it's hands-on role play, etc. You apply, do a background check, and then you do a certain number of mediations. Depending on your experience, you bring a certain number of points to the table. I don't remember the whole number of points, maybe 100.
I don't remember. I did one like that when I was there.
But once you hit that amount of points, you send in your application and they do your background check and you become certified.
But you don't have to be a lawyer.
Correct. It's many more points if you're not a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, when I was doing it, you had to be one of a certain number of professions. It wasn't.
And I think you came in
like,
as a.
I came in as a clinical social worker. You could be a clinical social worker. You could be a pediatrician. Isn't that interesting? You could be a CPA for obvious reasons. You're divvying up money and valuating property and assets, or a lawyer. And so that was an interesting batch of people. It was funny when I was in the training. I told everybody, because I was coming in, even though I was married to a lawyer and I've been a paralegal all those years, I've been around, I've just marinated in lawyers. I was coming in from the therapist position. And so I told everybody, it was so funny the way the mediation training went. I said, you could definitely tell the shrinks from the sharks. Because the lawyers were like, I don't care about your feelings. I want all the money. I want everything possible my client needs. And I want this to be done as soon as possible. I don't want to hug when this is over. I don't want us to all exchange emails. I want to win. I want to get out of there. And the shrinks were more like, we need to separate as good as possible. We need to make this as harmless as possible. All parties, we need to make a safe environment for the children. You all are going to be co-parenting in the future. So you need to be able to be civil and everything. I wanted to talk about that, how to break up a marriage in a civil way. Are you what we call a collaborative mediator?
So I am not collaboratively trained.
Okay.
That is another niche training area. And it involves basically involving lawyers, accountants, mental health professionals, and trying to collaboratively disengage. The rub, and I think why it hasn't taken off as much as it could in Tallahassee. Yes, because if you don't settle, none of those people can help you in the litigation.
They're all conflicted out. So if you don't resolve it, you got to get a new lawyer. Your other person's got to get a new lawyer. You got to get a new mediator. You probably got to get a new parenting plan coordinator or whatever. It's real expensive if it doesn't work. But if you're both genuinely committed to having the best, uncoupling, as Gwyneth would say, I guess, or the best, disentanglement for your children, and you are committed to a good, healthy future with each other, I think it's worth the investment. But yeah, it's got a lot of risks to it. Shavetta, you've been listening for a while. You got any questions for Trudy or anything you want additional information on or follow up? What are your thoughts so far?
I'm just listening and wanted to just ask you, have you had with the different types of divorce, or I know with divorce, reasoning for divorce, children involved, no children involved, and so what is your experience with dealing with like those that have divorced and have young children? Do you have like counseling afterward? Sometimes when you enter into a divorce, make the decision to get divorced and go through the process, a lot of times the spouses kind of see it at their point of view, but really looking at it from the children's standpoint and the effects long term that it may have on the children, regardless of whatever age.
That's a great question, Shavetta. That is a big part of my practice. I'm also a parent coordinator and a guardian ad litem. So I look at it perhaps a little more holistically than just straight up litigation. I can't overstate how important it is to remember that while the adults are not getting along, the children, whether they're yours, the other person's, or joint children, they're all watching you and they're all learning from how you engage or how you disengage. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. You know, a lot of people, when they're engaged in, and especially women who feel like they have been abused, in my experience, anybody, but it just tends to be women that I interact with who feel like they were mistreated in that relationship. When they do finally get the courage to leave it, a lot of times they look at civility as weakness. They're like, I'm not giving up anything. I am here to fight. I am not, this person has walked all over me for all this time. I am not. And there's such a fine line between sticking up for yourself and saying no more and turning something that's already unpleasant, a divorce or a dissolution or a custody separation, turning that into a God blessed bloodbath that doesn't seem to have any end, when there's nothing but just human shrapnel and just carnage. And next thing you know, everybody, the court hates everybody, and people are getting sanctions and getting terrible orders and firing this lawyer, hiring another lawyer. How many people hire 3 or 4 divorce lawyers just to get told the same thing by every single one of them? You know, golly, that is so heartbreaking to watch when you're trying to support these people in that situation. Do you know any silver bullets for fixing that once it starts?
So I wish that there were a silver bullet. I frequently tell, especially my parenting coordinator clients, I'm here to work myself out of a job. And the reason for that is, if I can help you get along with each other, you don't have to live together. You just have to be reasonably cordial and be good to your children. Then you're going to work me out of a job. And that's what I want, because you and your new partner and your former partner and the children are all going to be the better for it. That's the children aspect. Going back to what you said at the beginning about that fine line between I'm not going to take this anymore and being unreasonable.
Yeah.
I had a client who was kind of the traditional, not very involved in the finances, long-term marriage. The other party was vehemently opposed, and I hear this a lot, that is my retirement. You did not earn it. You are not entitled to it. I am not paying you alimony. So we mediated for like 10.5 hours. It was crippling. And I finally looked at my client and I said, listen here, you just got all the equity in the house. I don't care if we call it alimony, if we call it money from Venus or Mars or what have you. Doesn't matter what you call it, but it's money in your pocket. Take it and go. And she hadn't thought about it that way. She was just hung up on, I need alimony to survive. Right. And I'm like, you don't, you just need money.
Right. Yeah. Some of them get married or get overly invested in what we label things. You know, it could be a property distribution, but they want alimony. You know, while we're on alimony, how common is that anymore?
That was my question too.
Isn't it based on 2 things? It's based on not just your need for it, but the other person's ability to pay it, correct?
The law has changed on that. So I'm interested to know what Trudy has to say about that. That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
And so the legislature has said we have 3 periods of marriage. We have short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Short-term, the presumption is no alimony. Medium, there is no presumption. Long-term marriage, the presumption is for alimony. Now, if you have 2 people that are earning relatively the same amount of money, no. But if you have one that is a stay-at-home partner and the other is an employed partner, then when you hit medium or long-term, it happens. I don't think that we are quite at the place where we were 15 to 20 years ago, where the numbers are much bigger and it's a bigger percentage of the pay or salary. But it does occur. A lot of times, if you have need but no ability, the court can say, all right, person that needs, I'm going to award you $1 every month
Mhm.
for alimony because the person that should be paying you has lost their job, is disabled,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
That gives the court the ability to go back and revisit that award
Yeah.
when
Good.
financial circumstances change.
Because they've established entitlement to it through a need. There's just not that other component of ability to pay, but that's going to change is what they're anticipating. And when it does, let's come back here and revisit it.
I
Correct.
have a question on that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of women go through this analysis where they either don't feel like they deserve alimony. Maybe they hear from their ex-spouse or their family members that they don't deserve alimony. This is the guy, he earned all that money. You stayed at home with the kids. And what I always tell women when I hear that is that you staying at home with the kids for 10 years while he established his career was you investing 10 years of your life into his career.
100%.
That entitles you to a portion of what he's bringing home.
Yeah.
Trudy, what do you say when women bring that up to you, or even a man who needs alimony who brings that up?
Yeah.
The first thing I ask them is, how many times has your spouse stayed home with all these rugrats and managed the household for a day? And if and when your partner did that, were they exhausted at the end of the day? Yes and yes. So if you've done this for 10 years, what is different other than you're not being compensated and having taxes taken out?
That's your job, man. That's your job. It's a big job, and it's one they wouldn't switch with you. And then sometimes you help them get the education that allowed them to earn that kind of money. But you know, I want to be a very encouraging, open-minded feminist, and I want to support women in all choices, not just the ones who make the choices I would make and I think are in their best interest. I just want them to do it with an open mind and an understanding of at what cost. Because when you do take yourself out of the job market, I don't care if you were top of your class when you graduated, if you're not in the job market, competing, networking, keeping your contacts and your skills sharp, when you try to go back 10 years later, 20 years later, 25 years later, not only are you worth almost nothing, okay, not only are you not going to be able to compete with people right out of school, you look like a handicap that they could have to teach new skills to and stuff like that. You look like a burden. So I just hope you understand, if you don't keep your skills sharp and you don't make yourself relevant, you're not just going to swing back into the job market where you would have been, but for the time you invested in this marriage. So there's a parity there. So you're not going to make it back. I can't stand how many times people say, well, she's got a college degree. She's 3 hours short of a master's degree. When I married her, she had those kids 25 years ago. Why can't she start as a CEO?
I totally agree.
Can't she do it?
The way I think about it and the way I tell people about it, my friends or family or whoever's going through it, is you and your husband are in a partnership in your marriage. It's like a business partnership. You're donating what you donate to the business. He donates what he donates to the business. And when you split ways, you split the proceeds of the business equally. If you're donating your time and supporting the home and he's donating his time and his salary, it all goes into one pot and then you split it. So alimony is just a business decision. That's all it is.
Yeah, but still, it's not a winning business decision for the person who supported the income earner. Because when you look at the amount of money that a person pays to alimony to the spouse, that is a fraction of what they contributed to the household income.
Easily.
When it was intact.
Easily.
So usually the male, the income earner gets an immediate increase in standard of living.
Yeah.
And they only have to pay that alimony until the other person qualifies for Medicare and Social Security and that sort of thing. So it's not like forever. It's not like forever. So really, if you are dependent on an income earner, I don't want you to feel like, well, I'll just get alimony. First of all, you're not entitled to that because they will move some money around and it will look like they don't have an ability to pay.
Yep.
Believe
absolutely.
me on this. Okay. Believe me on that. So if you can track the money down, what you're going to be getting in alimony is a fraction of what you had whenever the family was intact. There was one household, everything was going into a pot. So again, if that's what you want to do, and a lot of people believe that's the biblical life, that's the woman's role, that's the man's role, that's what you do. And I respect the heck out of that. I just know that I'm a realist, I'm a pragmatist, and I know what happens when real life gets in the middle of that, and that person that you think shares your values decides they don't anymore, or at least on this one. You and your children will appreciate an immediate drop in your standard of living. That's just all there is to it. And you're not going to be able to mitigate it by jumping back into the workforce and getting competitive wages. You're just not. So just be aware of that. Rose, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts on this? what we've talked about today?
Well, I think it's important is for, like you said, women especially to protect themselves. And, it's not anything that's relevant to me specifically, but I'm curious about if you have this situation or if there is any legal recourse for the situation where people are not married, but they have entangled their lives in these ways that a married couple would. They own a house together, they have shared bank accounts, they have kids, and now they're breaking up. Do they go through kind of the same process, or is there any formal process for them to disentangle those things?
I want you to answer that, and then I want to follow up with that article I posted today about the cause of action that woman's suing on. But yeah, what about that? When you're shacked up, as they used to call it when I was young.
So yeah, if you do what I did and you have the child before you get married, then you get divorced, that makes it a little easier. But if you have the child and you've combined your lives, it's really two separate things. It's paternity on the one side, which is a judicial determination of parenthood, and then it is contract on the other, which is not a place you want to be.
Fair enough.
Although as a woman, it's not a bad thing on the paternity side,
right?
Because and I represent a lot of men in that area, because Florida says we know where the baby came from. We don't necessarily know who made it, but you, mom, are the only one with rights to this child until the court says otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And I always look at it this way, between the person who is the father and all the rest of us taking care of that child with that mom, I want daddy to pony up first. So I'm all about, I don't care what it was, but if a woman's going to be burdened with a child, I don't care, at least versus the rest of us in society. I want the person who at least got to have some sex to pony up. I didn't have anything out of it. I got nothing. Okay.
And that brings up another interesting topic that actually we were talking about in the office today, which is when you have a same gendered couple. If you have two men who are adopting a child, that's a fairly easy item. If you have two women and one has the biological child, there is a split of opinion. I've been working with a lawyer over in Jacksonville on this issue of, is it better to just swallow the bitter pill and have the non-biologically related parent in an intact marriage when that child is born adopt that child? Or do you stand on principle and hope that the law doesn't change? That's a very big topic right now in family law circles.
What else I want to ask you about? What about other causes of action for things that happen in a relationship? I posted something today on the EmPower plan. I saw this interview today with Gail King on CBS this morning, and I apologize for not knowing the woman's name. She's an artist and she goes by 3 letters.
FKA Twigs.
What is it, Rose?
It's FKA Twigs.
FKA Twigs. That woman was so self-possessed and poised, and I just thought, man, she should be the voice of her generation. But she was in a relationship with someone who was very controlling and abusive, and it eventually escalated into a physical thing. But she's suing the guy.
Yep.
Now, don't misunderstand me. Most of these people who treat you like that ain't sitting on a pile of money and collectible assets. So don't everybody blow up my phone saying, I need to sue this guy. I know you need to sue
but
him.
If you were dating Shia LaBeouf, call us.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're, if it's a football player, an athlete, somebody with a bunch of money, somebody owns a company, whatever, call me. Call me anyway, because we're gonna get you some help to get out of that relationship. But if you want me to collect for you, I can't do that. I mean, the best lawyers in the world can't work for free. We've got to have somebody with something to go after. But sometimes they do have something to go after, and sometimes they're the worst. They think they're immune and they're just terrible. But this woman is suing this man for assault. She is suing him for intentional infliction of emotional distress, one of my very favorite causes of action. I love that one. And probably for false imprisonment and some other things. I just love it because most people up until now, they just think that's just a bad relationship. The remedy in that relationship is to leave. It's just to not be with them anymore. But no, there should be a consequence. There should be accountability. Are you seeing an increase in lawsuits like that?
I don't, because I tend to send my civil work over to you guys. on the plainest side. I don't see it in the family context as much, because it's usually, if there's violence, we have an injunction, then we either have a dissolution or we have a paternity action, or we wander around in contract for a little bit trying to divide up the assets and liabilities if they were not married and don't have any children in common. I like the sound of that, of someone having recourse against.
I bet that will get, if that gets some traction, that's going to change behavior.
Absolutely. Yep.
If someone believes they can get super, because guess what happens in a marriage? Trudy, tell me if I'm wrong on this. If you're in an abusive marriage and you're getting beaten, or you're getting gaslit, and you're getting, psychologically, screwed, you're getting, what was that thing we published last week? What do they call it? Some sort of coercion. What is it?
The emotional abuse thing?
Yeah, but they call it something. They're starting to introduce legislation to make it a crime. Whenever you mind control and control somebody's finances and their ability to go places. I mean, there are people who will get in your head to the point, like this young woman today, she said that she had to give her partner 20 pieces of love and affirmation a day. And she would get panicked because it would be 8 o'clock. And she's like, I've only got to 8, and I've got to put 12 more in 3 hours before he goes to sleep. And I'm like, oh my Lord. But that is her life. And you think, well, why don't you just leave? I love it. Gail King asked her, she goes, why didn't you leave? She goes, that's not an appropriate question to ask a victim of abuse. That's not something you should ever ask. If you want an answer, ask the abuser why they subjugated a person, why they held her hostage, why they screwed with her so much she didn't feel like she could even call her mother. Ask him that. Okay. I'm in the middle of this. I'm just trying to survive every day. Don't ask me why I didn't leave. I love that. I thought that was so powerful. I want to ask one more thing about it, because we could talk all day on this, girl. How important is the date of filing in a divorce in terms of financial with each other, that sort of thing? I think a lot of people do not appreciate the significance of the date of filing.
So it depends, which is a completely lawyer answer. You value assets and liabilities either from date of separation or date of filing.
Right. And we don't have legal separation in Florida, right? Like a so-called, we're legally separated.
No, I mean, you either live together or you don't. Yeah. If you separate in October and you file in November, there's probably not a whole bunch of difference.
Yeah.
I had a really interesting case years ago where the parties had been separated for almost 15 years. And they both had children by other partners. I mean, they just basically did a poor man's divorce and just went their separate ways and forgot about it. And then ended up having to try to readdress and disentangle, because the children that they had were technically born during their intact marriage.
Right.
Even though the father was someone else. So we had to disestablish paternity, establish paternity, figure out a date for evaluation of assets that was fair and equitable. I mean, it would not have been equitable to say, 15 years later, I get half of your retirement.
Right.
When I haven't seen you.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you shouldn't be able to say, we separated in October, you sold off all the assets before I could file, I'm entitled to nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I know somebody who thought he was smart and cost himself several $100,000 by not understanding the importance of the date of filing. It matters.
I like that grin, Dana.
You do like that grin, don't you?
I sure do.
Smart ass. Cheers to me. No, seriously. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Who else on our panel? Kimmy, Shavetta, Rose, Carrie, what do you want to ask? Let's go around one more time. Yeah.
I have a question for Trudy. Trudy, what's going on right now with child custody? Because I think a reason a lot of women don't get divorced is they think they're going to lose custody, or they think they'll be stuck with every other Wednesday and every other weekend. I know that the trend now is for week on, week off. Is that really what's happening? And can you give some reassurance to anybody who's watching about custody issues?
Yeah, like is there a default plan for people who can't work it out that the court puts on you?
I just learned about 223 scheduling lately, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, what is all that? What is all that?
So the trend is equal time sharing with both parents. We don't call it the custody and visitation any longer. It's all shared parenting and time sharing. We change the words every 10 years or so.
Good.
At least in our circuit, it has been strongly suggested that each judge start at equal time sharing and move from there as is necessary. The law says you have to fashion a parenting plan that takes into consideration the best interest of the children. There are all these statutory factors, A through, I think it's T, that the court is supposed to look at. I like the fact that this area is not presuming that one parent always gets majority time sharing, the other parent always gets a weekend and a date night. That having been said, I think your point is well taken, Rose. Week on, week off works for older children.
Right.
I have seen as much as every single day with an infant.
Yeah, that is true. Now that is, I mean, that is for real. Because that is true, because a child will forget their parent. I mean, they don't need an overnight. An infant doesn't need an overnight with the non-custodial, but maybe, 30 minutes, an hour after work every day. That is a big thing. That matters until they're a good bit older.
And judges are not as swayed by, oh, I'm breastfeeding and I'm going to continue to breastfeed until kindergarten, so you don't get any overnights. Judges are like,
that.
They make this neat little machine. You can put it in the freezer, or you can send it with the other parent.
Send it with I've got some personal experience with that a couple of times, but yeah. That's, but I think whenever you're at that point, they're not really talking about an amicable dissolution. People are engaged in their power plays at that point. That's a power thing. That's something I've got that you can't, you know what I mean? And they're not really thinking of the child's best interest at that point. Because if you've got a child who's still being breastfed during a divorce proceeding, that kid's taking a hit already.
Mhm.
So come on, let's not make this worse, by battling over how we're going to get nutrition into this child's body.
The other thing I want to touch on really quickly is kind of the word on the street, right?
Yeah, let's hear that.
I've done, I don't know, 1,100 mediations last count when I had to reapply. Word on the street is, if we get 50-50 parenting, whether that's a week on, week off, or 2 days, or 2-2-3, or a rolling 2-2-3, or however we frame it up, nobody owes each other child support. That is fundamentally incorrect.
That's right.
Okay.
And it does not help you, payor, whichever parent is going to be the payor, to negotiate for time that you cannot exercise. Because the statute says, if you do not exercise the time sharing that you negotiated, I can file a supplemental petition and get child support from the first day you did not exercise.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of people think, I want 50-50, I want 50-50 because I don't want to pay any child support. But then they will use any excuse under the sun to not pick that kid up. Oh, I got a thing, I got to work, I got a thing. And then you look at the reality and no, this woman's taking care of this child like 90% of the time. And she's not even getting, a heads up. It's just, he doesn't show up, you got to rearrange your schedule. I mean, so it's so much worse than if she could just plan on being 100% in control of the child. So it's like a double whammy. And then he's not paying child support because he supposedly has them 50% of the time. Don't take that. If someone isn't exercising their parenting time, go to a lawyer and get a correction, at least get some additional money so you can plan for and have backup childcare so you can have a disrupted life. Because every single time something like that happens, though, that's usually a woman who takes a hit. That's a meeting for drinks she can't do that will help her in her networking and furthering her career. That is some working on a side gig at night that she's not going to be able to do now. The financial impact from this screwing around with people and playing games, it's always the woman who takes it. Like right now, women are dropping out of the workforce. 25% are out of the workforce because they have to homeschool the kids because of COVID. All these men, they're competent. They can homeschool.
That same woman is having to explain to the children of both of them why their other parent didn't show.
Oh yeah. And you want to go because he's an asshole. That's why. But you can't say that because then you're one. You've got to, on top of getting screwed, you've got to put some lipstick on that pig and make that child believe that the other parent cares about him. It's another job.
Right. I have one pending right now that was after 3 days of trial. Dad got ordered. It was like 27% time sharing. 7 days last year. 7 days.
Wow.
Is all he exercised.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
Oh, and I'm on him. Like,
I'm not about it.
Harrier on the
Shameful.
school.
I'm not about. I have one question. I want to go back to our panel, but I do want to end on this note, and that is civility. So give some thoughts into that. What what you can do. Sometimes you can't do a damn thing, but sometimes you can talk some people off the ledge and give them some insight. Say, look what you're doing to yourself and your family and your children. You know, civility is not necessarily weakness. It can be done the right way. Kimmy, what are your final thoughts today?
I've got two questions. At one point, Trudy, you were talking about alimony and how it depended on a medium term relationship or a long term. What are the years for that? How long do you have to be married to be considered medium, and how long for long-term marriage?
And does that vary by circuit?
No, 1 to 7, 7 to 14, over 14.
Okay. My second question is, you brought up if same-sex couple, they're women, one of the moms has the baby. The question is, does the other mom adopt or not? And I know you said that's something that's a conversation that's happening right now. What is your advice for the other mom who's not the birth parent?
So that's a really hard thing for me to advise, because the lawyer side of me says, the law says if this child is born into an intact marriage, these are its parents. And that is what should happen.
Yeah.
The heart side of me says, we have come so far. You finally have a recognized marriage, and now you have to step outside the box and be second class again to ensure that you have rights to your own child.
Yeah.
So the lawyer side of me says, call Rusty over in Jacksonville. They are fantastic.
Yeah.
Carrington Meade is the kind of preeminent attorney that I send folks to who have complex LGBTQ questions.
And they can be so complex. Surrogacy, that could be so
I have
complex.
something to ask about that. If it's a couple where one has donated the egg for the other to carry as a surrogate, does the parent who gave birth or the parent who donated the biological material, is there a presumption of who has parenthood there, or is that split, or I don't know?
One is the biological parent, but that's not the one who gave birth.
Right. And there are so many different permutations. We had a really long conversation at the office today about this and some other things, like how do trans people get health care that isn't declined for being the wrong code.
Yeah, we just got a question on healthcare. Can you be legally separated and still carry the other person on employer sponsored insurance? I would imagine you can, because that's kind of binary. You're married or you're not, right?
Yes, and the standing order in our circuit says you may not disenroll your spouse or your family members during the proceedings. You must continue coverage as it existed on the date of filing, unless, of course, your employer goes out of business or you lose your job or whatever.
Yeah, but you can't just say.
You can't just say.
Done with
my
it.
insurance
Yeah.
today.
I got you. And then another comment, I know women who go without child support because they don't want to be confrontational. When I was a counselor, it happened every day. I don't want to put him in child support. I don't want to put him on child support. He comes by when he's got some money and he'll take the kids and get them some clothes shopping and yada, 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 you know?
But child support is for the children. It's not for the parent. It's not for the parent to decide. It's
100%.
That's why it's dictated by law. You know, that's why we have the statutes that guide what child support is.
Correct. And
why?
it is not waivable by a parent.
It isn't.
The child's right.
No, and the reason why is because, again, that's a societal problem. And if the two people who are caring for the child, who are obligated to care for the child, don't do it, it's passed on to the rest of us. And so I think from a policy perspective, the two people who are responsible, who brought that child into the world, that ought to be the first line for taking care of it. They shouldn't get to opt out and put that on us. That's just a policy thing, and that just makes sense. And you're not being controversial, you're not being confrontational, you're not being a jerk, you're not being difficult. You're holding up other person to account for full parenting the way you are, and that's what your children deserve is full parenting. Who else wants to? Kimmy, you had two questions. Did you get both of them?
We got them both.
Got them
Thanks.
both. Okay. Anybody else tonight? Shavetta, Carrie.
I just wanted to address this point. When I divorced, we filed for divorce. We were living in Florida. We were living in Tallahassee. But we separated and I moved to Georgia. We filed. So I just wanted to talk about just address jurisdiction, because I actually filed in Florida, but I had moved to Georgia And then when we did the financial affidavit and for child support and all of that, I had to go and then file in Georgia for child support and all of that. So it became so much of just going through the process. And I really understand what Carrie was saying about it's not, child support is not for the parents, it's for the child. But it became so many, like, matter of fact, years. And I just kind of like did away with it, didn't even continue to pursue it, and just like, you give what you give and let's be done with it. And it sort of worked out, but again, just, knowing where you are, where you're filing, and when you move and what happens.
Yeah.
So jurisdiction is a complex question, but I can kind of cliff notes it. Jurisdiction is proper in the place where you last lived with the intention of remaining married. So if you last lived in Tallahassee with the intention of remaining married, Tallahassee was proper to file a divorce. Caveat to that is, if then you move to Georgia with the children and their home state under the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act is Georgia, then Georgia would have jurisdiction for the issues of support. Even though Florida might enter the initial order, Georgia would have enforcement and modification. That process is slow. Department of Revenue in Florida is in charge. I don't know what the corresponding department is in Georgia, but they both move at the speed of molasses in winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was in law school, I had a case like that where they were arguing over where the home state of the child was, whether they were in Tennessee, but a mom had gotten a child and taken it down to Florida. And then when she got the child down here, she decided she didn't want to give it back. And so she filed something to get custody and stuff here. And so Florida, because she said the child was in danger. So Florida's trying to protect that child as they would. And then Tennessee's go, no, this is some shenanigans and some, yada, yada. And that was an expensive disentanglement. I mean, it took so much money to get that cleared up. It can be moving in jurisdictions that can be real messy and expensive.
Absolutely, as can parental kidnapping and retrieval of children from other jurisdictions.
And how about this? In Georgia, do you do any divorces in Georgia?
I do not. I am not licensed anywhere but Florida.
Yeah, me neither. But I did hear this. Listen to this. In Georgia, you can have grounds for divorce. In Florida, it's no fault. So there's something like 6-7 things you could pick to get divorced from in Georgia, and you can get a jury trial. Can you imagine trying your divorce case to 6 strangers or 12? I don't know what they have, but can you even imagine? Oh,
and the children can file an affidavit at the age of 14, electing to live with it, expressing an opinion. And people ask me that all the time. What's the age at which a child can decide in Florida? I'm like 18.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, when you're an adult, that's when you can decide.
Precisely.
Right.
Until then, other people decide what's in your interest. Thank you very much. You don't know everything, young man. But yeah, Georgia, I mean, I love me some Georgia, especially lately, but they've got miles to go before they sleep. Does anybody have a question before I let Trudy go, which I'm reluctant to do, but I have her on overtime. You have been an incredibly wonderful guest. Everybody's commenting, everybody's loving you. Carrie Taylor thinks this is wonderful. Julie Wolf, she gave us some stats, y'all. She said 67% of second marriages and 74% of third marriages end in divorce. That's an October 2020 stat. I have no personal experience or documents or research to dispute that. I think she nailed it. So anyway, thank you. Thank you, Trudy. Anybody else on the panel have any closing remarks or thoughts?
Thank you guys for having me tonight. It is always a pleasure. At some point, we will have to actually see one another in person again. That would be great. Have some actual cocktails together.
I miss it. I'm so ready.
Yes.
Anyway, I'd like to have Trudy back on so we can do this some more, because I think we have a lot more to cover.
I bet you once we finish promoting this, we're going to get a lot of questions. We're going to have to reconvene on that. But thank you all. Thank you so much, Trudy Ennis Richardson. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name in the promo I did earlier today, because I actually have a friend named Truly. It's an uncommon name, Trudy and Truly. So anyway, I spilled that, but thank you, Trudy Ennis Richardson, for coming and talking to us about family law. She takes care of family law, prenup, postnup, get in, get out, kids, custody, all that. And if she doesn't do it, she knows the people that she trusts that she can refer you to. So always contact her, and you can find out about her through, she's on Facebook. You can Google her, you can contact us. We'll put you in touch with her. She's top notch. We all love her. Thank you again so much. Lori Finn had to bug out. She was here with us. Kimberly Hogan, my law partner, Carrie Rome, my law partner, Rose Caswick, Shavetta Carter, my good friend. And thank you all so much again for another wonderful episode of the EmPower Hour, brought to you by the EmPower Plant by Facing Brooks. We'll see you next Thursday at 4:30. Y'all have a good weekend.
Thanks, Trudy.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Trudy.
Thanks.